Hello, and welcome back to Saints Squad. I am your host, Dylan Sanders from Saints Wire or the Tulane on SI. And I think that the Saints should go after a wide receiver pretty early in the NFL draft.
I'm Rush Jackson, host of the Locked On at Saints podcast, and I think Penn State tight end Tyler Warren is one of the three best prospects in this year's NFL draft.
John Hendricks, publisher for Athlon Sports, Saints connoisseur, and yes, I do have the best hair on this podcast.
This is former Saints wide receiver Lance Moore, and while I'm no Michigan man, I'm going to tell you why I think Will Johnson can be a cornerstone piece for the Saints defense.
It's the Saints Squad, sponsored by Gametime. Everything New Orleans Saints, every week. Covering all the big hits and game-changing plays from down in the Big Easy, the way only Locked On Podcast Network can. Get ready and squad up. It's the Saints Squad show, starting now.
Hello, Who Dat Nation. Welcome back to the Saints Squad, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making us your first listen every Monday and Thursday morning. We have a unique group of experts ready here to bring you a fun and informative show on everything New Orleans Saints. Today, we're going to be diving into stuff like what will Brandon Staley change on the defense side of the ball? We're going to look at some true or false scenarios surrounding the Saints season. And then right now, we're going to jump into some can't-miss 2025 NFL Draft prospects. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. What is going on, folks? Welcome back.
Dylan got a whole extra hour this morning, and he is lit right now.
Boom. I'm ready.
Bring the energy, man.
I'm ready.
If that opening song doesn't get you ready to move, I don't know. I feel like I need to go to Mardi Gras or second line right now.
I brought my Endymion coffee cup. I'm ready. I'm feeling it. We're in New Orleans, baby.
Yeah. Not Lance. Lance is comfortably on the West Coast, though.
He's in New Orleans in his mind, though.
Yeah, of course.
Always am. I always am.
Speaking of being in New Orleans, let's talk about some guys who we think have to be in New Orleans come the NFL draft. Ross.
Yeah.
Who do you want? You talked about a little bit.
Yeah, you talk about can't miss guys in the 2025 NFL draft. For me, one of the can't miss guys is Tyler Warren, the Penn State tight end. And I know what you're thinking, first round, that's not the place to go for a tight end. But look, 104 receptions last year, 1,233 receiving yards, 8 receiving touchdowns, and added what he did as a Wildcat quarterback and through the run game too, out of the backfield. I'm actually going to leave that out of the equation. I just think a guy that has the build and the athleticism, the yards after catch ability, that player at that position having an impact in Kellen Moore's offense feels like a natural fit for me. So if I'm pounding the table, or if I'm standing on the table for any can't miss prospect, especially in the first round, I've got others later, but especially in the first round, Penn State Tyler Warren is near the top of the list for me, 100%.
I mean, I will not complain about adding any tight end talent to this roster. It's been years since I feel like, the prospect of Juwan Johnson has always seemed fun. I liked him as a receiver coming out of the draft, and I like his potential, but it just feels like that, that project has never been able to go to that next step. So I don't mind adding another tight end.
I think that Tyler Warren is and now stay with me here, but okay. I think Tyler Warren is a more polished and bigger upsided Taysom Hill. I mean, like the things that he was able to do, he was clearly everybody loves Drew Aller, right? That he's going to be the next, top 5 quarterback next year for Penn State, blah, 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 blah. Tyler Warren was the best player on the field 99% of the time when Penn State was playing last year. He's a matchup nightmare. He's huge. He can run. He's got great hands. He was like their go-to guy throughout the season, no matter where they were on the field. They put him in at quarterback. He ran the Wildcat. He's hard to tackle. He's a great fade and jump ball receiving pass catcher type guy. He literally does it all, and he's definitely worthy of a top 10 pick. Obviously, we're at number 9. I would not be mad at that at all, because you look at what the Saints are trying to do now, and it to me feels like more of receiver by committee, obviously. But if you add another guy like that to the mix, and people could say, oh, we already have guys. Well, yes, but Juwan has been up and down for whatever reason, injuries, etc. Taysom clearly is hurt still. So you put a guy like that in this offense, the more tools you have in your toolbox, I mean, the better potentially you can be. And I love Tyler Warren. I mean, I think he would be a great fit in any offense, but particularly what Kellen Moore is trying to do with this offense.
Yep.
And, I totally agree with you on that one, Ross, for sure.
Like Tyler Warren running the over routes the way that they did with Dallas Goedert last year over with the Philadelphia Eagles. Like you can see it immediately in what Kellen Moore has done elsewhere where Tyler Warren would fit in this offense and in his scheme here in New Orleans.
Yeah,
so
I know
just translate.
I was going to say, there's just a lot of upside in having a strong tight end. I mean, look at what Brock Bowers
100%.
was able to do with the Raiders last season. Trey McBride with the Cardinals. I mean, Travis Kelce still being a dominant force as he is. I mean, the tight end position still matters. And of course, Saints fans, there's always that void left behind since Jimmy Graham, really. You know that. I mean, they've tried to fill this. I mean, they've done a formidable job. I know Ben Watson did a pretty good job there. They tried with Kobe Fleener in free agency. They've tried all sorts of different things, but nothing has quite fit. And to Lance's point, Foster Moreau is also coming off a major injury. Taysom Hill, we don't know when he's exactly going to hit the field. And, that's going to be a big depending one. They had Dallin Holker at the position last year. They didn't use him, right? Like he was this guy that made the roster, never used him. So I'm with you. I think upgrading the tight end position is definitely a win, especially in Kellen Moore's offense. And you look at the receivers, we talked about on the first episode, Brandon Cooks, Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed, guys that are not as tall. I would like to see somebody, a bigger bodied guy, a tight end that you can make those contested catches, move the chains, all that different stuff too.
100%.
I know that we're not supposed to scout off of highlights, but as soon as I saw Tyler Warren snap the ball and catch a touchdown on the same play, I was like, all right, give me some.
That's a hard one. That's a hard one not to at least point to and go, oh, look how fun this guy is, or look how ridiculous this guy is, or whatever. You're right. We don't scout the highlights, but man, that's one that's hard to ignore for sure.
Let's switch over to the defensive side a little bit. Lance, tell us about your can't miss prospect.
Yeah, I mean, in the open, I talked about not being a Michigan man. Well, just for informational purposes, I'm from Columbus, Ohio, born and raised. My entire family went to Ohio State. I still cheer for Ohio State. OH, happy champions this year. But look, man, you can never have enough corners in the NFL, and you have to have quality starting corners to begin with. While I think we have a couple corners that are good players and still probably need more reps. I'm talking specifically about Kool-Aid McKinstry. I think he's going to be a really, really good corner. Just hasn't had enough reps yet. I think he has the potential to be a very good, potentially even a Pro Bowl corner. I mean, obviously he had a great career at Alabama and a guy that was highly sought after in the draft. I feel like Alontae Taylor has been his best self when he's playing inside in the slot. And it's not easy to play in there. A lot of people think that this guy can't play outside, so let's stick him inside because it's easier. And no, it's definitely not easier inside. The responsibilities that you have as a slot corner, especially in the modern NFL, is tough. It's you have to understand alignments. You have to understand route patterns. You have to understand personnel. Oh, and by the way, you're in there in the box. So you've got to run fit to hit every single run play as well. And what do I mean by run fit? Run fit basically means each player on the defense has a gap in the front. That nickel corner or that slot corner has a gap himself. Now, ordinarily, it's going to be on the outside, like the 8 or the 9 gap. But sometimes he's got to insert himself in the inside in the box where a linebacker would based on what the defense is playing. So it's not as simple as, oh, this guy just has to cover the slot receiver. This guy has a lot more responsibility. Oh, and Alontae doesn't just fit well. He also blitzes well. So
Mhm.
I think if having Alante outside a lot last year based on injuries, Marshawn's trade, I don't think he was able to be his best self. So I like Isaac Yiadom, but I think he's a depth corner, honestly. I think he had a good season for us a couple years ago, and he's back for a reason. He's back most definitely to me because he's not an everyday starting cornerback in the NFL. That's why he's back. He's comfortable. He liked it in New Orleans, but I think we need another starting corner. And I look at somebody, Will Johnson, like somebody in the mold of Patrick Surtain. Long, lengthy, athletic, can run, very, very good mirror guy in man-to-man coverage, and somebody that I think this defense could really, really benefit from. Especially since we don't have the greatest pass rush, a corner that can really get after it and play man coverage and can play against bigger receivers. Athletically, I mean, he's top tier. He's been a starter since day one at Michigan, right. The guy that they counted on to do a whole lot for that defense. So I see him as somebody like a Surtain that can come in, start day one, and really be that lockdown guy for us and really just add to the good group that I think that we have. He could potentially push him over the top to becoming one of the better groups in the NFL.
Yeah, I feel like the addition of Will Johnson makes the other corners better, right? Yep. Like it takes Kool-Aid McKinstry, puts him in a CB2 spot where he could be a little bit more comfortable. It keeps Alante in the slot where you're right. He was one of the most disruptive players, even by the end of the season last year, because of all of the early disruption that he had in terms of sacks, tackles for a loss, pass breakups, all these other pieces that he was a part of over on that defensive side. Yeah, 3 sacks the first game up against Carolina and everything like that? Like just all these incredible things that he does. And so I think you get a guy like Will Johnson, who has been noted as fully recovered here recently, by the way, from that hamstring injury that limited him during the pro day, or not limited him, but kept him out of his pro day at Michigan, as well as the combine. And he's going to have a workout on Monday for NFL teams. I imagine, Lance, that the Saints will be in attendance for that, because this is a guy that has kind of been out of sight, out of mind, I think, for a lot of folks. And so this is an opportunity for these teams to finally be able to go down there, put their eyes on him, and then get some of the other answers to the questions they have about him, right? You have the turf toe injury last year that ended the season early, the hamstring injury that limited him this year. Medicals are obviously going to be an important factor. You're not going to figure that out on Monday. But speed, athleticism, does he still have all of those things that made him special at Michigan? Despite these injuries that he's managing and stuff like that, you're at least finally going to get a little bit of an indication of that, I think, with that private workout on Monday. So I think that's a big day for Will Johnson for sure.
I'm going to go with someone that I think that Will Johnson would have a tough time covering. It's a name that is I'm hearing a lot more recently, and it's exciting because I've been a fan of his since the college football season. I'm going to go with Iowa State wide receiver Jaden Higgins. Talk about a guy that is everything that the New Orleans Saints have liked in the past couple of years at wide receiver and will like in the years if they do take it. He's fast, tall, he can run routes, he can do it all, and I think he's the perfect complementary piece to those true burners that they have in Chris Olave and Rashica. Jaden Higgins can do it all. He can be that red zone guy. Derek Carr, if he is the quarterback in the first round, we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But if he is the quarterback, that's the kind of receiver that he has seemed to like, And I just think that it's hard to go wrong with Jaden Higgins.
I think it's a solid pick, personally.
Yeah, I do too. He's definitely somebody I think is climbing, and somebody that you can get behind if you just put the tape on. You know what I mean? Tape don't lie up some of that stuff, and you see how he's able to perform. And I mean, I don't have many questions about him at all, right? Like I think he's just somebody that you could see in the Saints offense and see him doing well on just about any team that he goes to.
Yeah, there's all these. Go ahead.
Mickey, I need you to go over to Twitter, type in Jaden Higgins math bomb, and you're gonna look at that relative athletic score, and you're gonna be crying tears of joy.
There's all this conversation right now around Tetairoa McMillan, right? The Arizona wide receiver, and some of the things that have come up about him. Like, does he really love the game of football? Him getting off of press man coverage. that video that leaked around him, which I kind of rule out because that was before that was during his freshman season. Like there's time here. I assume that NFL teams have already kind of answered that question, figured all that out. But it's interesting when you have a guy like Tet, who is undoubtedly a fantastic prospect, but has all these other question marks, which let's acknowledge too, could just be teams trying to get him to fall, right? There's a little bit of a game to be played in all these situations too. But then you have a guy like Jaden Higgins around which there are none of those questions. And he has similar athletic or similar, let's call it like athletic traits, 4.47 speed on top of all that as well. And so I always kind of wonder, like, what is it that makes Jaden Higgins not a first round pick while Tetairoa McMillan is a top 10 guy? And so I'm always very curious about like what goes into what separates these guys. And I'm sure it's these like little minor details that NFL teams know and pay attention to. Lance, I'd actually be curious about your thoughts on that. Like what's the division? Like what are some of the things that are the division in guys like that?
Well, I'm going to start with a news flash for you.
Yeah, please.
Not every NFL player watches film, believe it or
not. Right.
Kyler Murray was vocal about it recently in the last couple of years, and he's the starting quarterback, $200 million man for the Arizona Cardinals, and he doesn't watch film. So if people are crying about a receiver who has gifted enough skill and size to be able to just go out and dominate his opponents, then they're worried about the wrong things. But I guess to answer your question, what specifically is it that scouts look at to separate guys that seem to be similar? And honestly, it's not really a direct answer, but whatever traits they feel like translate over to the NFL the best are generally the ones that they lean on the most. Because I've seen plenty of guys. I represented a guy last year out of Auburn named Marcus Harris. He's a defensive tackle. He was first team all SEC last year. First team all SEC, had 7 sacks. He didn't get drafted until the 7th round. So and the whole time we're like, wait, how is this even possible? This guy was first team all SEC and he didn't get drafted until the 7th round. But after talking to enough teams and scouts, they felt like he didn't have all of the traits that they were looking for. I still think he's going to have a great career. I still think he's going to do well. But it was kind of a tough lesson for me to learn about the process, about what teams are thinking about guys. And honestly, they're not going to give away their entire formula. Like, you know, they're not going to say, hey, these are the 5 or 6 things that we have to get this guy into the top, you know, whatever. But I think, you know, McMillan had a bunch of games last year that you're kind of like, whoa. And then really in his career where you're like, okay, this is a dude. And it's not always schematic with him. It's let's just throw the ball up and let this dude make a play and see what he does with it.
He's down there somewhere.
To me, he jumps off the tape more. If I was just to answer your question, how I feel, I can't tell you specifically how teams feel or what exactly they're looking for. He just seems to be a little more dynamic, and that's why he's in the conversation for wide receiver 1. That's why he's a pretty solidified first round pick. And I have questions personally, you know, is he going to be a day one dominating type player like a Mike Evans? Or is he just a complimentary piece to a team that's already got a solidified wide receiver 1? I mean, I honestly, I don't know. Because it's not as simple as, okay, he's just going to do exactly what he did at Arizona in the NFL. I don't necessarily believe that, but I do think that he's going to be a really good player in the NFL. And if he takes care of his business, he can be that for a long time.
That's awesome. Thank you for that.
Yeah. And Lance, I want to touch on it real quick. How much do you think the fact that Tet has been playing with his childhood best friend at quarterback for the past couple of years has, you know, helped his transition, or do you think it's going to play a role at all whenever he gets to the NFL and he doesn't have that familiarity?
No, I mean, you're talking about an NFL wide receiver. Like, you know, most of us, you can plug in and play. Like he's played enough football to be able to go into a system that has an established quarterback. Now, if he's going somewhere that's drafting a quarterback and goes, he's going to hit the ground running. First round receivers are ready to go. Teams aren't drafting first rounders for them to sit on the sideline and learn how to play football. They're drafting first rounders to come in and start day one. So I don't think that's going to be an issue. I think it probably helped him a little bit at Arizona to have his buddy playing quarterback. I had a similar situation when I went to school at Toledo. I had my high school quarterback go with me. And while he was only there for one day of freshman camp, we did have a good connection early on. It'll be interesting, but I don't think that will be an issue for him at all.
Well, when we get back to y'all, we're going to be talking about who John thinks is a can't miss prospect, and then we're going to jump into some true or false scenarios coming up next on Saint Squad. There's nothing like the energy of a live game, whether it's catching a last-minute MLB showdown or soaking in the excitement of an NBA matchup. But finding great seats at a great price, that used to be a challenge until I found Gametime. Gametime makes scoring last-minute tickets easier than ever. Prices actually drop as the event gets closer, and with their all-in pricing, you see the total cost up front. None of those surprises that you hate seeing whenever you go to check out. Just the other day, I went to go buy some Tulane baseball tickets, and I was like, man, these things are way more expensive than I would feel like paying for a Tulane baseball game. But that was on a competitor. I switched over to Gametime, got cheaper tickets, got my tickets immediately, and it was the easiest, smoothest, no surprises process that I've ever had for buying tickets. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Gametime. What's up? We're back. And John, I want to hear who you think is a can't miss prospect.
All right, I'm going to cheat here, guys. I'm going to take Ashton Jeanty. Shocker. First of all, let me just put it this way. Let's just put it this way. I think the drop-off between him and the next running back is significant. I don't even think it's close. First of all, that's what I would say. Second thing I'd say, the comparison I have for this guy, and follow me, younger guys, Emmitt Smith mixed with a little bit of Frank Gore. That's what I see in Ashton Jeanty. Okay. So I think what I see in him, he has the vision. He has the patience. He has the football IQ. I think he uses his peripherals really well. The patience when he runs into the line, between the tackles, all that stuff. And then when he gets out into space, you got to guess on how to tackle him because he's so deceptive in that area where if you try to put an arm tackle on him or misjudge it, you're going to be falling on the ground. He's going to break a couple of extra yards. And so I also say that in the sense of when you look at the Saints, and the Eagles ran a zone and a gap run scheme, right? And the Saints, I believe, are going to continue to run that zone gap run scheme here with Kellen Moore. So I think the days of the NFL are being dominated on the ground. We've seen that with teams like Baltimore, Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson, Philly, Jalen Hurts and Saquon Barkley, even guys, teams like the Bucks, Rashad White and Bucky Irving. I mean, you look at all the tandems up there, the Saints have got to have the tandem. And with no Taysom Hill in the mix, I think Ashton Jeanty is a guy when you look at they're not defining the exact touches for Alvin Kamara, and Alvin's going to still be great, right? I think Alvin can run a lot of different things. But I think when Jeanty and the uncertainty of guys like Kendre Miller on the roster or, Jordan Mims or Clyde Edwards-Helaire, I put Jeanty in this lineup. I feel really good about that 1-2 punch. And I think he's somebody that you could give him the 20 carries a game. He could get more, right? I don't worry about the durability being that he had so much work in at Boise State's offense. But I just think that when you look at the evolution of the NFL, he's got a lot of the pro skill sets that you really want. I think whoever drafts him will not be upset, and he's going to be something really special in this league.
I love it. I get the idea that you're not supposed to draft running backs in the first round and all this stuff, and I understand it, but I don't know that Kellen Moore and the New Orleans Saints are ready to subscribe to that line, that type of thinking. John, you brought up on Monday, John, you brought up on Monday Kellen Moore's conversation with us at the annual meeting where he kind of said, I don't really look at it like running back, fullback, tight end, wide receiver, in line, out wide, slot, all this other stuff. It's just skill position guys. Now, I don't think that that's the same as saying he's going to draft a fullback in the first round. I'll be very clear about that. There is still some positional value that matters in the league. There's no doubt about that. But, if you think about impact as a whole versus impact from a specific position, Ashton Jeanty's got to be up there as a potential blue chip guy. Maybe one of the four, I would say, blue chip guys in this draft with Travis Hunter and Abdul Carter, definitely those guys. And then I feel like Tyler Warren should be in that conversation. He is for me. Some people feel like Mason Graham could be there as well. And so I think like you look at a guy like Ashton Jeanty in the way that he would be able to complement, and not just complement, but be the future of this run game for New Orleans, because you don't draft in 2025 for 2025. You're drafting in 2025 for what happens between 2025 and 2035 if you get lucky. Just an unstoppable guy. I think the one big concern for me when it comes to Ashton Jeanty is not really that much of a concern. It's just a lot of miles and a lot of usage while in college. What's that going to mean for him going to the league? But same was true for guys like Saquon Barkley. Same was true for a guy like Derrick Henry. Like, we've seen it before. And so I don't think that it's a limiting factor. It's just one of those things that is one of the very, very few question marks, I imagine, around the Boise State running back.
Yeah. Ashton Jeanty's awesome. Running backs are awesome. The NFL draft's awesome. Well, let's talk about who the Saints have on the roster right now. Let's jump into some true or false scenarios. Lance, I want to hear your thoughts on this one. True or false? Chris Olave will have a career year in 2025.
True. If he stays healthy.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like that's been the only thing that has stopped him from continuing to ascend to be one of those guys. It's like, oh, okay, like this dude is for real. We've seen flashes. We've seen the potential. Obviously, we know he can, get down the field and make those big plays. But I want to see a little more versatility in his game. And I think with a new offense, with a new innovative offensive coordinator and obviously head coach like Kellen Moore, I think he'll have more on his plate this year as far as running routes, being a guy that can beat man coverage, being a guy that can play inside and outside. And not just the down the field guy. I think this will be a career year for him, but he's got to stay healthy. And hopefully he's done a great job throughout the offseason of taking care of his body, putting on a little bit of muscle mass. Because we know he's thin. He's thin built. He's not small. Like, people always think like, oh, he's small. Like, he's small. He's every bit of 6'2", 6'1", 6'2". He's just thin built. So a little bit of muscle mass, and even if it's not muscle mass, a little bit of weight will help him. And I look to see him this season doing more than what he's done in the past. That doesn't necessarily mean more yards, more catches. I just think his responsibility in this offense will have more to it than it's had in the past. And I think that's something that you see from receivers as they grow in the league. And he's one of those guys for sure.
Well, I know it's been scary with Chris Olave, the head injuries. How much can you do as a wide receiver in the NFL to avoid those injuries, or is it pure luck or pure bad luck?
I mean, for him, it's he's taken some shots where I don't know that there was anything he could do. I was fortunate enough to be around Joe Horn, who, while a lot of people think he's crazy, which I'm one of those people, I love the guy to death. He was great to me in that receiver room. He kind of took me under his wing. But I was coming from college and high school where I was just big enough where I could drop my shoulder on a corner and knock him down and maybe run through a tackle or two. But he was the first one that not just told me, but showed me, like, you don't have to run people over, bro. This is the NFL. Like, those guys are trained killers, And I'm not saying that's what Chris Olave has done, trying to run. Right. He doesn't try to run guys over. But Joe showed me, like, okay, know when the journey is over and get down. And I think if he continues, now he's done it from time to time, Chris has, but if he continues that in his game, I'm not gonna go berate him and say he needs to be doing it all the time, because he is so dynamic with the ball in his hands and he can run through and around defenses. Like, I want to continue to see him do that. But there are definitely times and moments where he's going to have to try to protect himself a little bit better. Because we're talking about head injuries. It's not like we're talking about he's got broken ribs 5 times or he's got hip pointers and things like that. Like we're talking about concussions that could lead to catastrophic issues in the future. So he's got to do a good job of taking care of himself. And I also think it's two-parted, right? The quarterback has got to do a great job of trying to better protect his guys as well. Because if you put them into harm's way, the competitor in all of us wants to go and make the play, wants to go get the ball no matter where it is. Yep. So if the quarterback is able to protect him a little bit better as well, I think we'll see, better results as far as his health goes, and specifically talking about the head injuries.
Well, John, I'm going to put you on the spot here with this next one. True or false? Derek Carr starts game 1 of the 2025 season.
True. Unequivocally true. I don't buy into any of the stuff that's been happening. Like, again, what I can tell you on this is that when Kellen Moore came in and had his introductory press conference, the way that they were kind of nonchalant, that's the way Carr's party took that, right? And so there was a little bit of friction there at the beginning. They worked through a lot of that. They're still trying to work through a lot of that, some stuff and such. But, they finally made a commitment, said, okay, yes, Derek is our guy. He gives us the best chance to win, all these other things. Like, I know we've talked about Jackson Dart. We talked about Shedeur Sanders, all these other things. And Spencer Rattler, just think about that meme where, you got the guy holding the hand of the girl and he's looking back at the other one. Like, Spencer Rattler is there too. You know what I mean? And so I would say Carr is your starter week 1. I know people will feel certain ways, but even if they take a Shedeur or they take a Jackson Dart, or if it's Jalen Moreau or Quinn Ewers, whatever the case, I don't care if they take a quarterback. Derek Carr is your starter week 1. He's not going to ended up getting traded. I think he's going to be their guy because it gives them the best chance to win. Following the Saints breadcrumbs, this is what they want.
Yeah, Ross, what do you think?
On the Derek Carr one, yeah, I'm with John.
Yeah.
I think he's the week 1 starter until further notice. I think there's a difference between what people want and what will happen. And I understand the desire for Derek Carr to, for the Saints to go a different direction at quarterback. I get that desire. I get that want, all that. I just don't think that the Saints align with that. I think that the Saints are in a situation where 2025, you're rolling with majority the same roster from last year. They flipped the coaching staff. And then coming into 2026, then you start to see these big, massive changes over on the roster. And so I think Derek Carr is your week 1 starter in 2025. And I think you have a different quarterback starting in 2026 in week 1. I'll give you that true or false right now, Dylan. We don't even need, when we come back around to it next year, I'll give you the same answer. But that's the way that I look at it for Derek Carr and for the New Orleans Saints. I think it's less about the desire to change or not want to change or anything like that. And it's the situation that they have in front of them, and the situation that they have in front of them financially, so on and so forth, all points to Derek Carr being the starter for 2025 in week 1. The interesting thing though is I'm not so sure that he's the starter for the New Orleans Saints week 10. That's where I think the real, very, very interesting conversation ends up kind of coming in the midst of all of it too.
Well, someone whoever feels like, I just feel like we should touch on it. What about all of, we're talking about these drafts. What about all of the Saints? It feels like every piece of news coming out of the draft right now is that they're meeting with these quarterbacks. Would they be meeting with all of these quarterbacks if they truly feel that Derek Carr is fine to start week 1?
I think so. I think you meet with every player you can, and you meet with every quarterback, because here's the thing. You can't be sitting at number 9 and then have Shedeur Sanders fall to you on the board. And then you go, where's the scouting report on Shedeur Sanders? And then no one has any conversation with him. No one has any information. That is an impossible scenario. You're not going to have that be the case. And we've spoken with Jeff Ireland before, who has mentioned too, that sometimes you do all of this scouting and you do all of this work so that 4 years later, 5 years later, when they come off of a rookie contract, you have the ability to have you have research on them, you have thoughts on them, you have a scouting report on them, you have all these other things on them for when they hit the open market in case you want to bring them in later. And they've done that with several players. And so I think no matter what, you're doing that research for your quarterbacks because it's due diligence and it's the responsible thing that an organization should do. I just think that we're hearing about it because it's the quarterback position. But I promise you, they're doing just as much homework on safeties, just as much homework on wide receivers, so on and so forth throughout this draft.
Well, can I add to that too? Like I agree with everything that you said, but I also think there's a game that's being played as well by a lot of teams as far as trying to make other teams believe that you are going to take one of these quarterbacks or any player to to begin with, so that you can maybe potentially get a bigger trade package as a result, right? Like make somebody think, man, we really want this guy a whole lot. Maybe somebody knows that they'll offer us a little bit more to trade up to get that player. I think it's hate to say that it's a game, but I think it is part of the game and the draft process and making people believe something that maybe is not true. I mean, that nobody wants to reveal their hand throughout the draft process. So that could be a part of it as well.
You know what else goes along with that too? Like if we're the New Orleans Saints sitting at number 9 and I can convince the Pittsburgh Steelers to jump up at 6, 7, 8 to take a quarterback off the board, which opens up some skill position player, some defensive player to fall to me. Sometimes it's about also, I imagine, not just like, oh, what can I get in a trade, but can I make you move up to take a player that I don't want off the board so that I have my option of 3 players instead of 2 players at number 9? That's a really good point, Lance. I like that a lot.
Yeah, watch the Steelers, right? I mean, there's teams that you could probably watch out there that might be. I mean, again, you look at all these things that come up, and again, they did just as much homework on quarterbacks last year, but nobody wants to talk about that. I mean, they do look at quarterbacks every single year. You just don't know. And Ross, that was a great nugget you put out about Jeff Ireland. That's why they brought back or signed free agents, because they had those grades before. And Jeff Ireland's been doing this, since 2017. So it makes it a little bit easier on them. But again, we'll see how the chips fall, and some people might be disappointed on the first night of the draft, but whatever, we'll see what happens.
I'm going to take this one. The Saints, true or false, the Saints overpaid Juwan Johnson this offseason. And I'm going to go ahead and say, unfortunately, true. But with a caveat.
You're so wrong.
With a caveat.
Tell me the caveat.
The caveat is that they did actually save money this season by exiting him. They saved money in the cap this year. But I'm just all the way out on Juwan Johnson. I hate to say it just because, I love his TikToks. But I think on the field, I think they've gotten the most out of him that they possibly can. And it's just not enough. And I think that if you're going to be having these $10 million a season tight ends, they should be doing more than Foster Moreau, who you're paying under half that. Ross, why am I so wrong?
The reason why I think that you're wrong is because if you look at where his contract value is versus the other tight ends that are at that same contract value, he either outperforms or is in the same place. I just think, honestly, what it is that the Saints didn't overpay for Juwan Johnson. I think the fact of the matter is that that's how much tight ends cost, right? Like that's just where we are in terms of the contracts, in terms of the deals, in terms of the salary cap and all these other things. Now, I will say this. A big part of the overpay conversation around Juwan Johnson depends on what his performance is in 2025, right? He proves either you or I right or you or I wrong this year. This has to be, that situation. But I think just looking at the price there, 17 game averages, performance production, all those other things, and you look at him compared to some of the guys that are in the same payment range, the Noah Fants of the world, I think you're in a good position here with what you've agreed to give Juwan Johnson. Although I do think it was notable. that Juwan Johnson himself was surprised at the amount of money that the New Orleans Saints offered him. And so I do think that's notable.
I'll say this too. I think Juwan, in what we pointed out in the first episode and talking to Kellen Moore, they want to use him more in the second and third level, stretch the field, all this stuff. I think where Juwan needs to really get better at is blocking a good bit. And so I think that's something that probably needs to get a little bit better on his game, that make him more of an all around tight end and such. But look, he was available last year. I don't know that when you look at the targets and stuff, and that's why, not to totally back up, but when you talk about Chris Olave career year, I think there's going to be a lot of mouths to feed in this offense, right? And so if you're going against statistical, 87 balls, 11, 23, and 5 touchdowns, I mean, I don't know if he's going to put up better statistics than that, but for Juwan, I think his is going to be related to statistics. Can he get maybe 60 or 70 catches? Can he get 700-800 yards? What's the litmus test? Maybe 5-6 touchdowns. I mean, remember that year where he just kind of went on fire in the second half of the season and such. And I don't know, they need that player in this offense. And I think Kellen Moore and Chase Hazlitt, they can unlock him a little bit better, but he's got to go in there and prove that, that money was worth what they paid for him too.
Well, if we draft Tyler Warren, then that answer is yes.
I guess that's fair. Yeah, that's fair. He's
big overpaid.
Although you want
I have
to,
a question, like, can I come back and play tight end now?
I know, man. Like, that check looks mad different now than it did 10 years ago, man.
Yeah.
Like, or 5 years ago, even. Like, it's crazy.
Oh man. Well, we have one more true or false scenario to get to whenever we get back. And then we're going to talk about what is Brandon Staley going to change on the defense side of the ball. Dennis Allen's been around for a long, long time. Things are going to look real different. And we'll get to that in just a second. Oh, back. We're right back with you.
You nerd.
We're right back with you. True or false? Ross, I want to hear your true or false on this.
Yeah.
True or false? The ship has passed on Spencer Rattler.
Well, I kind of alluded to my answer a little bit earlier, I think, when I questioned the idea of Derek Carr as a starter in Week 10. So I'm going to say false. I don't think that the ship has passed when it comes to Spencer Rattler. And I think a big reason why is because I'm not completely sold that the New Orleans Saints are going to draft a quarterback in this year's draft, not one that's necessarily going to force them into the idea of starting, right? You grab a Shura Sanders at 9, you're committing to starting that player as soon as possible and as soon as is logical, right? Development, all these other things in conversation. I'm not completely convinced they're going to do that. I wouldn't be surprised to see them maybe swing at another 4th or 5th round quarterback like they have been over the course of the past few years. Jake Haener, Spencer Rattler included in that conversation. I think of guys like, Kyle McCord out of Syracuse, for instance. But I'm not so sure that they do it. And because of that, if Derek Carr, who we also now have to start having health, medical, and injury question marks about since he arrived here in New Orleans, he missed a couple of the second halves of games in his first season and then missed a large portion of the season last year with various injuries. If that were to recur, then I don't think that the ship can be passed on Spencer Rattler. I think it'd be irresponsible for the ship to pass until you have a surefire, better option behind Derek Carr than what you have in Spencer Rattler. But the way that Kellen Moore talks about him, the way the organization has talked about him, and all of the reports that come out of that building around Spencer Rattler, it's all very positive. People feel very good. And so if that's the case, it's hard for me to say true to that one. So I'm going to have to say false. The ship has not yet passed on Spencer Rattler.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. I just don't see it. I just, that's why I said what I said about the meme earlier. It's just Rattler. I think the biggest thing that you talk to coaches, you talk to players, and when they go from year 1 to year 2, the first thing that they always say, no matter who you talk to, is that the game slows down. They can finally catch their breath a little bit, and then they're able to do a lot more in their second year. Typically, doesn't always happen, right? But the thing is, I would expect to see Spencer Rattler be a little bit more comfortable, a little bit more poised. I know he's going to have he has a good football IQ, right? Like I just know that he knows the game. I think for his execution and putting it all together, and let's not forget the same people were talking about all this stuff. You can't sit here and defend or not defend him or defend him when the Saints were riddled with injuries and say, oh, he would have done great with all the starters, all this other stuff. Like, there's just so many things out there with Spencer Rattler, and I think he can be a good player in this league. But I think with the Saints drafting a quarterback, if they draft a quarterback, what they're doing is setting themselves up for 2026, putting a Rattler in competition with whoever they draft, right? Like, if that happens, they could still go to free agency. I know, a wild idea that the Saints could still want to go free agency to get their quarterback. Not unheard of. That's what they've been doing. But I would love to see them develop some quarterbacks on this roster. Doug Nussmeier on there. I think he's somebody that we watch. Scott Tolzien. I think they're going to be very underrated additions to the staff.
A lot of former quarterbacks at the top of that offensive coaching staff when it comes to quarterback, man. Like,
I think that the guy who just commented that said the ship hasn't even left yet for Spencer Rattler, I would agree with that. Like, how can you even take what you saw last year and be like, oh, this guy's done, he can't play? Like, he had one starting offensive lineman, he had no starting receivers, they couldn't protect him. Nobody even knew what the heck they were trying to do on offense half the time. So I can only imagine what he felt like trying to run an offense that nobody knew what was going on. The running game was inconsistent when he was in there. Like I would kind of just take that tape and kind of throw it out. Like, okay, we're going to start anew. You got a couple of reps, but this is going to be what it really is like in the NFL with a full offense, with a healthy offensive line, and a more than capable coordinator coordinating. Then you can evaluate what you see from him, right? Yeah. People can say all the great things about him, how he is in the locker room, how he is around the building, how he works. You watch the hey, Lance for GM. Hey, don't sleep now.
We're starting the campaign, baby.
He is a player that's got potential. He wouldn't have gotten drafted where he did if he didn't have potential. I was at training camp for a week last year. I saw him operate. I saw him throw. It doesn't seem like it's too big for him. I think he's got potential. Now, do I think there's a situation where the Saints draft a guy in the next couple of years very high and he comes in and is the starter and Spencer is the backup? I do think there's a very real scenario that happens. But I think the jury is still out on Spencer Rattler. But I also think that he's a better player than what we saw on the field last year.
And what, you got to remember too, it's like the Eddie Murphy, what have you done for me lately? Like, that's what people tend to stick with. And it's just like, what have you done for me lately? I've played games. What have you done for me lately? Like, I just kind of, but they got to get it. Like, give Spencer some credit. Like, he needs to get a full off season. Let him come in. I expect to see him a different player in OTAs, mini camp, and training camp will be a good litmus test, but just let him do his thing.
I like that we credit Eddie Murphy for what have we done for me lately and not Janet Jackson. Like, Janet Jackson deserves some shine in here. All right. That was my childhood crush right
but
there.
No. Eddie made it better.
Eddie, what have you done for me lately?
Well, we have talked a lot of the offense over the past couple minutes, but let's switch over to the defensive side of the ball. It's going to look a lot different now that Brandon Staley's in town and Dennis Allen isn't. What are some key differences that you're going to notice on the defensive side of the ball? I'm going to start with one that I've been begging for the Saints to adapt in a while, and I think it's finally time for them to get a little bit smaller and a little bit quicker on the defensive end. It's this fascination with the raw, small school, big, fast, high motor, but can't sack anybody defensive end that the Saints have been obsessed with for the past decade. It feels like, outside of Camp's cool.
Trey Hendrickson.
I was gonna say, Trey actually worked, but he worked somewhere else. I mean, he worked here too, and then he went somewhere else.
But I feel like they've been missing that dynamic presence, since Trey Hendrickson, baby. So I feel like that's one big thing that Brandon Staley can change moving in to this position.
Yeah. And this is a great time for it too, because it's an excellent draft for that style of pass rusher. There's a lot of these like speedy, dynamic, athletic, stand-up pass rushers that could fit that odd, let's call it just odd front scheme when they go to that. They won't live in that, but when they go to that, then there's absolutely the opportunity to add those kind of pass rush specialists, if you will, in this year's draft.
Yeah, David Walker, Central Arkansas, somebody I think about.
A lot.
I think you really, but I mean, you talk about Staley's defense. I mean, just looking at it, obviously 3-man front. I think they play a little bit tighter on the line, but they've got guys that can play a little bit differently on that. What I like about Staley's staff is the coaching, really, and I think that's what's the big difference. You actually have an edge rush coach now, right? Like, I think that's something we overlook. Jay Rodgers, I know it's probably not going to make a ton of headlines and all this stuff, but you look at the debacle, what happened last year with Todd Grantham at the helm, it was just all sorts of bad. And trust me, Ross and I heard a little bit about that at the annual league meeting about some of that stuff. But look, it's just the fact that I think you've got more coaches, and I like to focus on college a little bit more, like Terry Joseph on here and such. And I think that when you look at the staff, they are going to preach speed. That's always going to be a big thing. It's going to be getting off the edge. It's going to be athleticism, all those different things. I think you'll see some, obviously the star role is going to be a big deal on Brandon Staley's defense. But look, I think he can field a defense that's going to be more cohesive and on the same page. Like, you look at last year's defense, they were in all disarray, right? Like, it seemed like everybody was doing their own thing and expecting one group to do the other thing. I don't think there was any type of cohesion there. And in fact, I know it wasn't any type of cohesion. So that's what I'm looking for out of Brandon Staley's defense here.
Like that. Lance, you want to go?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm interested to see how the same pretty much personnel from last year, particularly talking about up front, transitions to his 3-4 defense. That to me is going to be probably the most exciting thing for me to watch. Who plays where, how often? Like I'm thinking about Cam. Like, where is Cam going to play? Obviously, I would imagine he's going to be a hand down guy. But how in year 15 is that going to be for him? Is he going to be a regular now playing up front because he's not, going to be strictly pass rush guy on third downs? Can Pete Warner stay healthy? Where does Pete Warner line up? Like, these are questions that I think we'll get some of the answers to as offseason starts up. We get into OTAs and minicamp. But it's going to look a lot different, clearly. Just talking from a picture standpoint, they're going to line up different. They're going to have different assignments. But I think it's going to start with the guys up front. Those guys with their hands in the dirt have got to play stout, physical, tough defense up front, because if they're getting pushed around, remember, you've got 5 guys on your front, but those guys on the edges are potentially going to be lighter in the tail guys that can get potentially pushed around in the run game. So if your guys in the interior are getting pushed around and your guys on the exterior are getting pushed around, it's going to be tough sledding for this defense. So, that's why I like a guy like Mason Graham, because I don't think that guy's going to get pushed around up front. But it's to me, the jury's still out. Like, it's going to look different, yes, but are they necessarily going to be a lot better because the same guys are playing in a different style defense? I don't know. I honestly, I don't know. And they are another year older as well. So it's going to be interesting to see. It's going to be interesting to see what type of pressure packages he's going to live in. You like I talked about Alante earlier, how great he is blitzing off the edge. I mean, he can't take that away from Alante, right? Like, you can't have a player that's great at something and then take that greatness away from him.
Right.
So it's going to be interesting to see for sure. But I'm hoping that it starts up front with us being stout against the run game, and then make teams have to throw the football on us, where I think we can be a good pass defense as well.
They're gonna have to see if they can teach them old dogs some new tricks, because these are guys that have been doing the same thing for a long time, and it has worked. One thing I haven't seen a lot of in the past couple of years, and that I think Staley, another place that can be improved, is adjusting to the talent on the field as opposed to the talent that is on paper on your scheme. Like, can he do something? Like, can he change what he does to fit who the Saints have on the roster, as opposed to just trying to force every player into their mold of a perfect defensive player for my system? Ross, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. And that's something we've seen, I think examples what you're talking about are the Zach Bonds of the world, the Caden Ellis's of the world, to an extent, the Trey Hendricksons of the world, right? Maybe should have been on the field more when he was here or something like that. And to Lance's point from earlier, I think Alante Taylor falls into that role right now. Now, injuries have kind of pushed him and moved him around as a big part of that, but can you get him to a place where you're playing to his strengths? Tyrann Mathieu as well. They used him so close to the line of scrimmage so much last year that maybe backing him away might have been, a little bit better, allowing him to do what it is that he wants to do, play a robber role and do all those kinds of things. As kind of a drop down safety and everything in coverage. Like, I think finding ways to be able to utilize your players to their strengths, I think is going to be massive for this Brandon Staley defense. And you'll get the opportunity to do that. One of the big things that I think you'll see that's very different is kind of the coverage identity itself. A little bit more cover 6 in terms of like the Vic Fangio tree and the way that these guys worked, where you're playing cover 4 on one side, cover 2 on the other side, and you have a safety that can drop down and run support on that cover 4 side that can take away some of these crossing routes that have really torn up that New Orleans Saints defense at different occasions over the course of the last several years. I think all of those things help to put players in better scenarios, even just pattern matching, right? Like starting off and watching how routes are developing off of the line of scrimmage, and then the set of rules that dictates what it is that you and your teammates do to counteract that. Like, you're just doing things that not only, to your point, Dylan, accentuate what it is that your players do well, but you're allowing your scheme to adjust based upon what it is that that opposing offense over on the other side is going to try to do to you. And that's something Isaac Yiadom talked about during his introductory or reintroductory press conference with us in terms of his return, was that he likes that, because if you're doing the same thing week in and week out, they know how to attack you. And we heard that so many times with the New Orleans Saints, both on offense and defense last year, where they would talk about, well, we just do what we do. We're not worried about what it is that they do. And I don't know how much of that is true versus how much of that is just like what you say publicly. But I do think you need to be ready to adjust to what it is that opposing teams are looking to do to you. What is it that they do well, all these other things. And so I think your ability to be able to change and match that, I think Brandon Staley has shown throughout every one of his stops, is not just a defensive coordinator, but a defensive play caller.
Yeah. John, what else do you really want to see change on this side, on the defensive side of the ball?
I mean, we talked about the run defense. I mean, they were 31st last year, but I want to see the secondary kind of come together a little bit more. And look, that's why when Lance talked about at top of the show about Will Johnson, look, you guys, if you tuned into Monday's show, you know my love for Jeanty Barron. Like, I would love them to see adding to that secondary, right? I just know that with this defense, they're going to play a lot of that 3-3-5 or 3-man front, right? And they're going to be in a lot of nickel here. And so you got to have defensive backs in this scheme. You got to have some speed. Barron runs a 4.29, right? I think I said 4.39 on the first show, but he's 4.29. He's a really fast guy.
Insane.
But, you know, again, I like a lot of the personnel. I want to see more from some of the guys that they have that are developmental, all this other stuff. But you do need to get better. And I don't know that you should have, just because I've been a player here for 5-6 years, I don't think that should give you any type of default or anything for this particular defense. Is they need to go with the best players that can match up and execute, right? Like, tackling was bad last year. I mean, tackling's been bad for a while. And that was the most disappointing thing about the Saints last year, is that their defense was primarily healthy with the exception of Paulson Adebo and Marshawn Lattimore. And so they should have played better. And that's why I mentioned the discombobulation and game plans and all this other different stuff. But I think for the players, seeing some of the development there, I'd love to see a big giant leap for Brian Brzee. I think he can be somebody extremely special on this defense. I'd love to see a resurgence for Carl Granderson. I think that would be a huge thing for sure. And then using somebody like an Alante. I mean, he begged Brandon Staley's like, use me how you need to.
Unleash me.
I think Alante's got the speed. He's got the traits that you want in this defense too. But how are they going to make it come together? I don't know. I'm really excited to see how that does happen.
Yeah. I've heard that I won't say several, I'll say a few of Brandon Staley's former defensive players reached out to New Orleans Saints defensive players and basically were like, you got a good one. Like, we're excited for their friends getting Brandon Staley as their defensive coordinator. And so I think that's a pretty positive sign too, when you have guys that were formerly coached by somebody calling up the guys that are about to be coached by somebody saying, hey, this is great. You're going to love this. I think that's a really, really solid sign.
Do you think that there's anything to make of, you know, he was a failed NFL head coach, but can he just now jump back into being a defensive coordinator and, you know, go back under the radar a little bit, out of the spotlight, and just go back to coaching football and seeing how that goes for him?
I think so. Dennis Allen's going to do just fine in Chicago. Like, I mean, let's just be real. Like, 100%. I think he's going to be just fine.
No, and remember, these guys were all position and coordinators before they were head coaches anyway.
Right.
So it's not like they're going and doing something that they've never done before. Like some of the greatest coaches in the NFL aren't great head coaches. And that's the reality.
Yep.
And just because a guy goes and fails at a job in his first or second chance, even, that doesn't necessarily mean he's a terrible head coach. It just meant that he wasn't successful in that go round. But I do think that, you know, he won't have an issue going and being a defensive coordinator this year. Like, he'll be fine.
Yeah, I completely agreed.
Mhm.
Completely agreed. I think there was a lot of reaction to, his Los Angeles Chargers tenure was a reason for the Saints not to hire him as defensive coordinator. We saw that all over the place. And I don't think that those two things are equate. I don't think people realize the amount of work that goes into being a head coach, the stuff that you have to know about. It's not just managing your team and managing your scheme and your system and game plan and all this stuff. Like you are literally a part of these people's lives in a way that I don't think people get, in terms of having to know about this and that and all these other things. Like, there's so much that goes into it, along with all the meetings, along with all those other things. And so I think Brandon Staley might have struggled in that scenario in Los Angeles, but as a defensive coordinator, no concerns.
Well, guys, thank you for listening to another episode of The Saint Squad. Check out me, Ross, John, and Lance on our socials for the latest. We will be back right here at this spot on Monday morning, ready to talk about how does a 7-round NFL mock draft sound. Mock Draft Monday,
Ooh.
folks. Get ready for it. And be sure to make your second listen the Locked On NFL Draft. Thanks, folks, and see y'all on Monday.